Controls. 1 minute past one and a hush fell over the room. I guess it must be time. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order and start by acknowledging with gratitude that we live and work on the traditional unceded territory of the Squamish. These people have been stewards of these lands and waters surrounding Aquelaham, Bowen Island. And welcome to the Bowen Island Municipality meeting of December 12th, 2022. And thank you for joining. December 12th. Old notes. March 25th, 2024. And thank you for joining. I'm Andrew Leonard, the Mayor of Bowen Island Municipality and the chair of this meeting. I'd like to introduce the other elected members of council before we start today. Starting on my right, we have Councillor and Islands Trustee Sue Ellen Fast. To her left is Councillor and Islands Trustee Judith Getty. To my far left, we have Councillor John Saunders. To his right is Councillor Tim Wake. To his right is Councillor Alison Morse. We are also joined by members of our professional staff team here this afternoon, including our Chief Administrative Officer, Liam Edwards, our Corporate Officer, Hope Dallas, our Chief Financial Officer, Kristen Watson, as well as other members of staff who will be making reports and presentations here this afternoon. This meeting is being recorded, and when members of the public speak during the public comments and the question and answer period of the meeting, your voice and presence will be included in the permanent recording, which is available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca, or if you're a YouTuber, it's live streaming there now to billions worldwide. This council meeting is an official forum for the conducting of the business of local government. We all love our community. We are all passionate about what happens here. I would encourage everyone to maintain a constructive and respectful tone during the public comments, question and answer period, as well as the meeting. And during the public comments and question and answer period, please direct those comments to myself. The agenda and full council package for this afternoon's meeting, for folks that want to follow along, if you haven't seen it, it is available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca. And with that, I will look to the corporate officer for the addition of any late items this afternoon.
We have several letters in relation to item 6.3 that were received from 22nd up till today.
Okay, thank you. With that, I will look to council to a motion to adopt the agenda for the March 28th meeting. Moved by Councillor Saunders. I think your hand was up first. Seconded by Councillor Fast. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that carries unanimously. Moving on to public comments, I will look to the corporate officer. How many public comments are there today?
8 total.
8 total. So each commenter will have 2 minutes apiece, either online or up here at the front of the room. Do not feel you need to rush. The time starts when you sit down and get comfortable. You will hear a buzzer go off or an alarm go off at 1 minute and 45 seconds, just to give you a sense of the time that you have left and to make any last points to council. And with that, I will look to our corporate officer for the first commenter today.
We have Monica Mitchell, who's joining us online.
Ms. Mitchell, are you online?
I am, sir.
Okay, we can hear you loud and clear. So whenever you're ready, feel free.
Thank you. And thank you all for your time today. I just wanted to speak briefly. I wanted to show up personally and encourage council to keep the power that council itself has uniquely been empowered with by the community of Bowen Island to represent us in terms of the situation of opting in on the Airbnb ban. As a cautionary tale, once a long time ago, I had a medical situation. I was faced with making an irreversible decision. My therapist cautioned me against it, but my doctor at the time, with all the information he had, said it was the right choice. I made that choice, and it revealed itself later to be the wrong choice. I worry with the Airbnb ban, if we opt in as a community, that we are giving the power going forward to make any necessary adjustments to the province and taking it out of the hands of council itself. I would like to encourage you, since, like I said, you are uniquely empowered to represent our small and distinct island community, to build your own set of rules. I understand that the housing crisis is the disease, that you are the doctors making the best decision you can at this time with the information that you have. But I would feel more comfortable as a resident of Bowen Island, as somebody who's been considering Bowen Island an important place in my life for the last 20 years. I would feel more comfortable if that power to make adjustments in the future, if you don't get the results that you're hoping to get, if that power resides with you and isn't turned over to the province. So again, whatever decision you make, I just hope that you customize it to this community, that you make it to the best of your ability. I trust that you will. I know that you've not opted into Bill 44 or the vacancy tax or other bills that were designed by the province to encourage more long-term rental housing, and you had your own reasons for doing those things. And I think you may make your decisions here, and you may want to make adjustments that are specific to our community in the future. I'm just looking at my notes. Sorry, I wrote it out. I may be out of time, but that's really it. I just want you to customize. That's my request to you today. That's all I got.
Thank you so much for participating here today, Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Next, we have Chris Melhorn. Not on Zoom, so assuming in room.
Yes, Mr. Melhorn, feel free to come on up and join us here at the front of the room.
Thank you.
Just in the seat so that the microphones can pick you up.
This is my fourth speech that I had to cut down because of how serious this is. It was interesting to see how uninformed our mayor was this morning on Global TV. We agree that BC needs more affordable housing, but cutting 44% of our accommodation is the wrong way and will harm all businesses on Bowen Island. As someone who grew up in communist East Germany, I'm absolutely shocked and extremely concerned about how politics is made nowadays here in BC. Our work, business thinking and entrepreneurship is no longer incentivized and supported. The bill was created for places like Vancouver to free up affordable condos. This is not downtown Vancouver. Bowen Island has been a tourism destination since the steamship time for more than 100 years. All Bowen Island businesses need our visitors. Opting in would signal that Bowen Island is no longer a place to have a vacation or to have a wedding or is worth visiting at all. Sensible and forward-thinking communities understand the importance of tourism for a region. Before we don't have hotels on this island, opting in shouldn't even be a discussion. Because if we do opt in, businesses in Snug Cove and Artisan Square will collapse and fail again, as they did before COVID. The cottages are certainly not the solution to the housing problem, but they are essential to the success of the businesses and the economy of Bowen Island. The current vote is not about long-term affordable housing. It is about our economy and visitor accommodations. This vote is pro-business and jobs or against business and jobs. If we are opting in, the people which will be affected by it the most will be some of the same people who ask for affordable housing. It will be the local businesses and the people which work in the businesses. It will be the retired housekeepers which can only afford to live on Bowen Island because they have the additional income from cleaning the cottages. Or you think gardeners will be called that often when the cottages sit empty? The knock-on effect will take over. So by opting in, we achieve exactly the opposite. Instead of helping the most vulnerable people, we will harm them. If we are opting in, we will destroy businesses and we will destroy jobs. I encourage our council and our community to be wise and responsible. And it is wise and responsible to wait for a year or two and see what impact or fallout the opting in option has on the life and economy in similar communities in British Columbia.
Thank you very much for participating today, Mr. Melhorn.
Next, we have Jan Stevens.
Hello, Ms. Stevens. Feel free to join us down here.
I appeal to council to vote against the adoption of Bill 35. As a vacation homeowner, I share in the pursuit of additional housing, particularly affordable housing. The struggle for housing has deeply affected our community, forcing valued residents and my staff over the years to leave Bowen due to limited choices. This is not just Bowen's challenge, it resonates globally. Our family vacation home holds 70 years of priceless memories. Inheriting the cabin 20 years ago, it became both a cherished retreat and a significant responsibility for me. Over the years, rising taxes and expenses have become challenging. Now I'm retired, relying on a fixed income. Short-term renting for less than 33% of the year is vital to subsidize the overhead costs. I'm hoping to be able to keep it and pass it on to my son, Akira. I can assure you that my property will remain dedicated to family vacations. It will not become a long-term rental, and we enjoy the use of our vacation home while proudly supporting tourism, a key economic pillar for the Bowen business community. For over 125 years, Bowen has remained a vacation destination where visitors integrate into the peaceful island life. Our guests have a deep respect for our natural beauty and appreciate our rural environment. Remarkably, since 2019, only 2 complaints have been lodged regarding short-term vacation rentals, a testament to the minimal impact that they've had on our community's quality of life. This raises a question. How many complaints have been filed against full-time residents for noise events past 10 p.m.? I urge the council to consider the profound implications of Bill 35 on individuals like me and find solutions that address our housing needs without compromising Bowen Island's economic prosperity and the livelihoods of homeowners striving to make ends meet. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens.
Next, we have Chase Horseman.
Mr. Horseman?
Hello, council. Thank you for listening. I'd really like to ditto what Monica said about keeping the power of this council within this council. I actually bought a house here solely based on this council's 2020 new laws. This was the one place in all of BC that I could have a home that I could majority use, but also subsidize as a rent through short-term rentals. My only option after opting into this bill is to basically subsidize somebody else living in my house, and I can't use it at all. And or keeping it empty, which I can't afford to do all the time. That's too expensive. And so what I would like to request from this council is to not opt in and change the rules for however you see fit, but consider grandfathering in the 30 houses that are affected by opting in, because people like me have made their financial decisions based on this council's rules. And I think there should be some continuity in that. So the rug can't just be pulled under from you 2 years later. It's very distressing. So I would just ask that you guys consider not opting in, changing the bylaws however you see fit, but also grandfathering in the 30 or so houses that this would affect to the owners, the SDR owners. So over time, when they sell, whatever they do, this problem that you're trying to solve these 30 houses will disappear off the SDR market, but it won't rip away the houses that this residence affects. Because it's very hard. Yes, I can't. It's too expensive to just hold it, and I also don't want to just lose access to it completely and all my rights to the RTA. So that's what I would just consider you guys to consider.
Thank you, Mr. Horseman.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Charles McNeil. Charles McNeil in the room? Let's check the Zoom. Not there either. Okay, we'll go to Tim Potter.
Mr. Potter, Mr. Tim Potter, are you in the room?
Okay, we'll go to Heather Hodson.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I've already written to Mayor and Council in favor of opting in to the provincial Bill 35 regarding short-term rental regulation. And I still believe this is the most prudent way for us to manage the increase in STRs by owners who do not live here full-time. What crystallized my thinking was the recent corporate intrusion into our municipal decision-making process by Airbnb when they referred to Bowen as, and I quote, a resort municipality, urging their Bowen clients to write to council in support of opting out. They advised their clients to tell you, amongst other benefits, how hosting these accommodations is good for our neighborhoods. I am still grappling with this concept. This was a well-organized campaign by Airbnb to sway council's decision. Many have already stated that the growth of unregulated STRs has already caused increased pressure on our aging infrastructure, chaos of ferry overloads, the disruption of our neighborhoods, increasing the scarcity of long-term rentals, and the withdrawal of some home sales from those people who want to buy and live here on Bowen full-time. The list is long. I can imagine that one of the reasons Bowen Island became a municipality in 1999 was to gain independence and to make decisions regarding our community without outside interference. It's vitally important to us as a community to decide whether we want to encourage the growth of the tourism economy like STRs going forward. And I also want to say that I believe that everybody who lives here full time supports businesses here, not just the STRs. The cost of opting in now will signal to me that we as a municipality are okay with being defined as a resort municipalities by outsiders, and that we will remain open for business to future investments in the homes for profit model. Opting out will be recognized immediately as an investment opportunity for STRs if other communities around us choose to opt in right away. And the best part of this offer to help manage short-term rentals is that it's free and there aren't very many services being offered to us at this price. Thank you.
Rosemary Knight.
Welcome, Ms. Knight.
Good to see you. So I am here to fully support the recommendation in your planner's report. I'm here to support opting in to the provincial STR legislation, which only impacts those people running STRs in properties that are not their principal residence. So there are many, many other options for tourist accommodation on the island. This is about non-principal residence STRs. This is about operating commercial ventures in our residential neighborhoods. So what is my priority as a resident of Bowen Island? And what do I believe your highest priority should be as you listen to all the competing interests? Stewardship of this island at its highest level. Stewardship of this remarkable place, an island municipality in Howe Sound, not a resort municipality, as Airbnb referred to us. What I believe is the greatest threat to this island is not climate change, it's people. And that's true in many places around the world. Here we are next door to Metro Vancouver. The threat to our island community from tourism is very, very real. What can it not be? In terms of affordable housing, the integrity of our neighborhoods, the continued spread of non-principal residents, STRs, is the commercialization of our residential neighborhoods. This legislation gives us an opportunity to act now and have the province cover the cost. It might only affect a few properties if we do this now. So some say, why not wait? But if we don't do it now, we will be the only place left that has not opted in, and a place without the empty home tax. We will become the go-to place for investment properties to be run as short-term rentals. Bowen will be heading towards a resort municipality like this. I want to remain an island municipality, not a resort municipality. Opting in signals we still welcome tourists, but we do not welcome the commercialization of our residential neighborhoods. Please act now. Please act opt in. Please accept the recommendation of your planner.
Thank you, Ms. Knight.
I believe that.
And I see, it looks like Mr. McNeil has joined us by Zoom. So you're in at the buzzer and you have 2 minutes. You'll hear an alarm go off at 1 minute and 45.
Great, thank you. And so sorry for, I thought the session was at 2:15. Apologies. And I hate to disagree with my dear friend Rosemary. I understand his positions very well. I'm just in a difficult position in the sense of having inherited grandparents' cottage from 105 years ago and needing to rent it somewhat in order to pay the bills and keep it in the family. And I just can't see how I can keep it in the family if I can't rent it occasionally. And I can't do long-term rental because the family needs access to the place, and so that's not an option. And if I don't rent it, then I'll either have to sell it or something, but it won't help solve the problem. So anyway, I just wanted to go on the record to say that I'm trying to square this circle and find a way to keep this precious heirloom, which provides such enormous value to so many people. They love the experience and I love being able to share it. And I'm deeply sensitive to the need for long-term housing. It's just that this wouldn't solve that problem. I'm all for solving that problem and want to really help in that. So that's my situation. Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to speak. Great to be with all of you, and apologies for missing the start signal.
Thank you, Mr. McNeil, and you did make it in time, so there's no need to apologize. That concludes our public comment portion of the meeting today. Moving on to delegations 3.1. Sorry, wrong agenda here. Moving on to delegations. 3.1, Japanese Canadian Legacies Heritage Site, a request for approval, municipal land for a heritage project. So I would invite the delegation to come forward here today. And please introduce yourself to the room and to the world and to council, and you've got about 15 minutes, including questions.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having us here today. I am Kathy Davis with the Bowen Island Museum and Archives, joined with community members Ellen Hayakawa and Ron Kato. We are part of a greater team that has been working on a Japanese Canadian legacy heritage project on Bowen. It is part of a province-wide initiative. The project is about honoring legacy and healing. We are requesting a letter from Mayor and Council supporting in principle a project of commemoration of Japanese ancestry, Canadians of Japanese ancestry who lived, worked, and went to school on this island from the early 1900s until World War II. We would like to include this letter with our BC Regional Heritage Grant application on March 31st. I will now introduce you to Ron Kato, longtime Bowen resident and architect who is part of the team.
Thank you, Catherine. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us present to you today. Would you be able to just scroll through the slides when so next, please. So what is this project about? It's a commemoration project commemorating the lives of Japanese Canadians who once lived in this community. It's about the future generations. It's to make them aware of what has happened here and to help prevent this type of thing, racial prejudice, ethnic cleansing of sorts, stop that from happening, ever again in this country. And mostly, I think what this project is about is I guess the funder and the province have come together and put forward this Legacies program. And we're hoping that we're able to create a commemorative memorial here on Bowen Island to commemorate this event. Next, please. So just a little bit of project overview. The proponent is the Bowen Island Museum and Archives. Funding agency, JCLS. Proposed budget for the project, 150,000. And the project status is that we have to complete our application by the 31st, and that's why we're here asking for this show of support. Next, please. So the event, I'm not sure how much everyone knows about this. Due to time, I don't think I'll get into any of the details, but essentially the Japanese were uprooted from their lives here on the coast and banished to the interior of the province. Next, please. A couple of years ago, Premier John Horgan signed into law this initiative to recognize these past injustices and named at that time the JCLS, the Legacy Society, to administer the funds that were made available. It's a sizable amount, a couple $100 million, I think, in all. Next, please. So in terms of who used to live here, so this, we found some images from the archives. Japanese used to be here on Bowen, like in every other rural community, working in the resource sector. Next, please. Some brought their families here. This guy, Mitz, was born here on Bowen Island. He was one of the guys that was given the boot from UBC in 1942 after Pearl Harbor. Spent the war years in a prisoner of war camp, actually, in Ontario, for expressing his opinion of what was happening to him. Please. And as we've heard just from our delegations before, Bowen Island has a whole history of being a resort. Next, please. And I think that the location and proximity to Vancouver enabled many Japanese groups, such as the Japanese school annual picnic that's shown here. So they came here for decades. I think that's my mother actually sitting there in the front row, fourth from the right. Next, please. And many other groups as well came to enjoy Bowen Island in the heydays of the 30s. In terms of sites, we're really at the beginning of this whole process. The funder is asking that any investment they make be made on publicly owned land. In terms of proximity to the code, we think it's important that if this thing is approvable, then it should be located somewhere in the cove. I think it's important to have a prominence in terms of its presence due to the nature of what we're hoping to achieve. Very limited funding, so the site selection becomes very important in terms of not incurring costs doing site development or modifying the site, things like that. And I think due to the nature of this project as well, one of the most important things is that it be done in a kind of a frictionless, cooperative, collaborative way. And so that's what we're asking, that we are able to work in concert with the municipality on this. Next. So in terms of project statement, I won't read these out, but I think this gives a good sense really of where or what the project is comprised of. It's really a project of reflection and the statements that I read out before to help prevent this sort of thing from ever happening again. And I think another important aspect is we really haven't started doing anything. So we want to work with you to select a site, an appropriate site, and then of course any design work would happen after that point, because without the site chosen, I guess as an architect, it's important to understand sites so that one can fully respond to the opportunities offered. Next, please. So the sites we were talking about, they're all three in the Cove, one at the docks, one at Sandy Beach, and one up at the community center. That's a couple of more images. Next, please, of what they are. So I think there's two possible spots on the docks that we looked at. Next, please. That's what they look like. The main part of the dock and also the Wharfinger's hut that's there is a little off on the side. both offer, I guess, a perspective on the water. It's a little bit busy there sometimes, as you know, but I think it also offers a unique, everyone arrives on Bowen since the beginning at that point. Next, please. Sandy Beach has some interesting aspects to it as well. Publicly owned piece of land there. Next, please. There's an interesting ramp that leads down to the water's edge there. Next, please. And that's the view that one gets at the bottom of that ramp. So an interesting look over Deep Bay. Next, please. And the community center is another possible spot. It's a little bit further away from the Core Cove area. Next, please. And there's this knoll that exists out in back of the site that offers quite an interesting viewpoint out over Howe Sound. Next, please. So just to reiterate our project vision, it's a commemoration project about Japanese Canadians here. It's about the future to help us remember that these kinds of things have happened here and to help prevent them from happening again. And it's, I guess, for the future to provide hope through awareness that this thing has actually happened. Next, please. So just to recap, what are we asking for? We're really just asking for a show of support here. We're not asking for approval. And we're asking that we are able to work through this with BIM staff. We're not asking for any money. We're not asking for any help to do the project. We're just looking to, yes, have not a partner in this, but we want to work together with you. We think it's a worthy project, and understanding how things evolve and unfold here on Bowen. I think it's important. Municipality is fully engaged. Thank you. Do you have anything else to add, Catherine?
No, I think that's everything. Yeah, thank you very much for your consideration of our request to support this project in principle.
Okay, thank you.
I'll see if there's any questions. Don't stand up in the curry way. Let's do council any questions, and I will make the note that there is a recommendation in our agenda on 9.1. There's some questions from council. Councilor Morse.
How much clarity do they need in your application letter for a spot, a site?
Well, if you ask them that question, they would say great clarity, like you pick a site. But I think they're really wanting to understand if the project is viable here, is more the question. And so a show of support from the municipality in that regard would be really helpful to support our application.
Councilor Getty.
I don't have a question, but I'm really excited that you pivoted from we wrote a letter of support for the recreation of the bridge at the top of Bridal Veil Falls. So that was not considered acceptable by Metro. So I'm really, really glad that you got together and have come up with this. I would personally not anticipate there'd be much change from our original letter of support, that other project. So the same applies in terms of it's a really good opportunity and a really good project. Get it before the deadline.
Easter Sunday at midnight.
Right. And I would just echo my thanks for coming back to us. I know that Ms. Hayakawa and Mr. Cato and Catherine and members of our Heritage Commission, who I see represented in the back corner of the room as well, have been working extensively on this. So thank you for your continued efforts to make this work. Council appreciates it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 4, the consent agenda. I'll look to councillors for any items that you would like to open the consent agenda. Councillor Getty?
1.7. Your task force on.
Any other items? Seeing none, I will look for a motion to adopt the consent agenda. Moved by Councillor Fast, seconded by Councillor Morse. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye, and that carries. And moving on to item 4.7, which is minutes of the Mayor's Task Force on Infrastructure held March 6th. Over to you, Councillor Getty.
Okay, so I read through the minutes and I read through the terms of reference and the recommendations from that are in there in terms of the last first and second time that council has touched this. And I realize that you've had one meeting and there's a schedule of other meetings. So I guess my question, you as chair of that committee is, does this mean that all of the discussions on infrastructure is going to go to that committee as opposed to the council as a whole? And, there'd be, I don't know, you delayed some discussion on some of the long list of projects, but in terms of getting more background material, but I'm a little bit concerned in terms of all of the questions that come up constantly in terms of follow up on some of the questions that have been asked already of the engineer at council meetings. And how do we, other than keeping track of the minutes or going to the meetings or, how it's, I don't know what's going to be on your agenda and I don't know what the detail of the reports that you're getting. And I have a continuing interest in terms of both the, some of the major infrastructure projects. So how do we keep track? And how does the community keep track?
The infrastructure pieces. So the Task Force on Infrastructure is set up as a standing committee of the mayor. So it doesn't have any executive authority in and of itself other than to discuss and make recommendations to council. So any recommendations that come out of that committee would still need to come to council. Generally, there are councillors, Councillor Wake and Councillor Saunders are on that committee. And the intention of that committee, in the absence of having a current infrastructure committee and having a body of technical expertise from the community that's been appointed to take a look at some of our infrastructure challenges, whether it's the public works yard or some of the challenges that we're experiencing with the water systems, sewer system, et cetera, is that really the intent of it, firstly, and the reason for setting it up as a mayor's committee is so that I have the body of knowledge and I have the advice needed to report back to council and make those reports. In terms of council's involvement, it is a committee, so any councillor can show up to the meetings and spectate them if they like. And council can refer any items that it likes to that infrastructure committee as well. As the chair and as the terms of reference, the committee itself can pull in other pieces of infrastructure, whether it's from the staff level, whether it's from other committees, et cetera, that might need a bit more deliberation. But ultimately, the goal of that committee is to serve council as we start to navigate some of these very challenging and very economically and logistically difficult infrastructure situations that we're dealing with. I've found it, and this is just personally from this chair, I found it a bit messy in the structure and the context of a regular council meeting where we've only got a limited amount of time and we're a mile wide and an inch deep to really get detailed and technical views on some of our infrastructure challenges. And that's why I wanted to create that body and do it rapidly to get the advice that I needed. And ultimately, the advice council needs.
Mayor, if I may just add on to that as well. The committee is there as an advisory capacity to council, and so it won't supersede any discussions that would otherwise occur at council. So all of the regular infrastructure projects and council will come to this council, but will also likely go through the committee as well. And so, and it is, council also has the opportunity to then make referrals to this committee like it would any other.
All right, so the role of any other committee or council member then is the attendance and spectator.
At this point, yes.
if there's questions, then we have to get other council members who sit or anybody else that's on the committee to ask the question.
I mean, I would offer, it's not necessarily that formal at the committee level, as we know from our committees, that, again, the intention isn't to exclude counselor or counselors, it's to get technical expertise and provide me with an avenue where we can deliberate and get advice, particularly from professionals. When we've got an engineering manager on that committee, a retired architect on that committee. We're looking for a third technical expert on that committee that can deal with everything from our procurement processes to some of the challenges that are already in play.
That's helpful. It's my intention to exclude and have some options in terms of getting some questions in. That's
Right. And feel free to reach out if
I don't need another committee, but I would like an opportunity to ask some questions.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Councillor Wake.
Alex has let us know that he's online now.
Okay. Welcome, Councillor Jurgensen. And with that, I'll look for a motion to receive the minutes of the task force committee or task force moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Saunders. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hands.
Aye.
And that carries unanimously. Moving on to business arising from the minutes, 6.1, we have Councillor Swillen-Fast and Councillor Getty regarding the notice of motion seeking exemption from Housing Bill 44 requirements. And I will turn it over to you, Councillor Fast, to introduce the motion.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm in the previous agenda, March 11th, we had our, this is coming from Councillor Getty and I as municipal trustees. And I did most of the drafting, so I'll speak first. And our notice of motion had a bunch of whereases in it, and I'll just touch on them briefly. Whereas the idea of seeking exemption from Housing Bill 44 requirements because we're the only island municipality within the Islands Trust. Whereas there was a letter from the housing minister saying that the Islands Trust was exempt. And yet here we are, provincial staff informed Bowen staff that Bowen is not exempt, even though we're within the Islands Trust area. And the letters patent say that we are a member of the Islands Trust and we're municipal trustees, all that kind of thing. So the question becomes, how do we function as an island within the Islands Trust that has so many wells and septic beds and is so rural in character and so different from the other municipalities and cities that how could we fit? And would some of the decisions be contrary to the Islands Trust Act, which also governs us? So how do we balance the need for additional housing? Because we do have a housing crisis, I'm totally with that. But how do we balance that with the Preserve and Protect mandate? And when Bowen has already got ahead on some of these things, we've amended the secondary suites and detached secondary suites bylaw so that only these areas in red need to be still attended to under Bill 44. So we're mostly done. And I just, this I only saw for the first time at the meeting before the March 11th meeting. It's all happening quite quickly. Here's a conceptualization of the wells on Bowen. It was used as an example in an Islands Trust presentation about freshwater stewardship. High domestic well density compared with other regions in the province, for those of you who may have seen that. Anyway, I'm just concerned that by having to follow all the timelines for adjusting not just the secondary suites and detached secondary suites info. This is from Daniel's first presentation, but also to do the December 31st, 2025, to have to update the official community plan to include the housing, and then to adjust the LUB to align with that land use designation how do we make sure that the freshwater sustainability and the ability for the island to absorb the septic waste or any other waste, how do we make sure that this is sustainable for Bowen Island in line with the objectives of being a rural character island within the Islands Trust? How do we make sure that the two acts, Bill 44, the Housing Act, and the Islands Trust Act, do not collide and create more uncertainty and gray area for Bowen? So this is why, cut to the chase, I put another briefing in there that Judy and I wrote through a power outage and Judy's computer crashing and all this kind of thing. So you might see a few things that you would prefer to edit. The first timeline that staff and the council has to meet is June 30th, 2024. It's not very far away. And yet we have all these other projects underway according to our strategic plan, and we wanted to focus on those. And so that's the purpose of bringing this question of can we seek exemption from Bill 44 requirements as the only island municipality within the Islands Trust. Judy will have more to say, but I'll just read the motion. So I'd like to move that a letter be sent from Mayor Leonard on behalf of council to the BC Housing Minister to request exemption from Bill 44 requirements as the only island municipality within the Islands Trust, and that the mayor's letter and Bowen Island Municipality staff report to council dated February 2nd, 2024, titled Provincial Bill 44, Upcoming Changes to Provincial Legislation, be referred to Islands Trust Executive Committee and Trust Council for information. That's my motion.
Moved by Councillor Pass, seconded by Councillor Getty. Questions, comments, discussion? Councillor Getty.
Can I add to the intro?
Absolutely.
All right, so this all started with a letter from the Minister of Housing, Mr. Kahlon, Minister Kahlon, to Salt Spring Island, the chair of their local trust committee. And they had asked to be exempted. They're part of the Islands Trust. They've got a population of 12,000. They've got all sorts of housing problems. Sorry?
They didn't ask to be exempted, they asked to be.
Councillor Morris, Councillor Getty has the floor. I can add you to the speakers list if you like.
The letter that I saw from Tim Peterson was that they're included in the exemption they wanted out of that. And this is the reply from the minister to them. And he basically says that because the Islands Trust has particular limitations in terms of particularly water and sewage, that he thought that it would take more planning and more detail in terms of figuring out a situation that would legislation that would better fit the Islands Trust, that it was a unique environment. It was the special mandate in terms of preserve and protect the unique environment and the unique amenities, and that he wanted to have more time to do that. He also said, if Salt Spring Island Local Trust Committee believes it's in the best interest of their community to enable SSMUH, small-scale multi-unit housing requirements, that they can update its zoning bylaw accordingly and follow the province's policy manual. And we've done that in part with some of our regulations, and this is a requirement with a deadline that is going to increase those areas of the island that are subject to this legislation, which is fairly closely aligned to what we've already got in place. So what we're asking for at this point is, in this notice of motion, is basically to get more time. So we're in the process of starting an OCP review, and we'll have to deal with those issues of capacity. And that's fundamental and basic to our understanding of future growth. We've very recently received this housing grant, and that's going to require more planning time. And in all of our recent discussions about strategic planning, we've already loaded up our planning department, and there's more that's going to be announced in terms of our decisions around that. But this is an opportunity for a bit of a reprieve, just in terms of some of those deadlines. It doesn't mean that we're not going to ultimately decide. It doesn't mean that we can't change our voting bylaws, it just needs more time. So, I don't know if anybody needs to be reminded about the history of the trust and why we're part of it, but, you know, the whole idea of the freeze on the development, there were all the small residential lots and pressures in terms of developing a resort. We had a province deciding on a capacity report back then, the Herbonen report, that dealt primarily with water and sewage. 50 years later, and we still got the same pressures and the same kinds of constraints. Our particular mandate from the Trust Act in terms of preserve and protect, and we're part of that mandate, and that is what has helped us to, when you see all of the growth and development that's going on all around us in the different municipalities, it's really helped us to keep a lot of the small rural character. And that's something that I think we need to be mindful of in terms of we're part of the trust. It has obligations and responsibilities. I believe that we've taken it seriously. I was on the committee that was deciding whether or not we should become a municipality, and that was a fundamental premise of our joining or changing our status from an electoral area to a municipality. There were lots of services that we needed to try and have more control over, but we thought at that point that the only way that we could ever get that vote to pass was if we agreed to stay within the trust, and the trust is important still. It slows things down, and we've used it to our benefit. And like so much that's happening in our world today, there's like the slow food movement and the slow clothing movement and all the rest of it. This is a slow development movement. And as we've seen most recently with the Metro Park proposal, this is helpful to us. We voted when we became a municipality to remain within the Islands Trust. We're an anomaly within a unique, difficult, complex governing structure. So it doesn't make it easy, and that's something that we need time to try and sort out, it seems to me. So Bill 44 is a top-down imposition. As the letter from the ministry suggests, we're not constrained in terms of what we can do to make adjustments as we see fit. And we can do that. It's just a matter of when we do it and whether or not we have to do it as quickly as this legislation requires. So more time is a good thing. Potential complications in terms of whether we're exempt because the rest of the island is exempt, but we're not because we're a municipality. How does that complicate things in terms of our compliance with the policy statement of the trust? Everything that we pass as a bylaw has to fit that. So if there's points that we raise in there that fit with Bill 44 in terms of development, but it doesn't fit with this exemption, does that create more confusion, complications, more complexity? And the bill requires that there be less in terms of community input, both in terms of notice and public hearings. And I think that that is something in this community that is going to be hard to for people to accept. So one of the options that's at the in addition to this is to get a legal opinion. And one of the things that Sue Ellen mentioned at reporting on a conference that she'd been to was that there was a lawyer that was for the Islands Trust, Bill Bullhauser, who is with Young Anderson. We're no longer using Young Anderson when we separated and became a municipality for potential conflicts, is my understanding. But he is somebody who has said this is some of the most potentially profound legislation that's come in since the formation of the Islands Trust, and that it's this whole business about being exempt from Bill 44 is, in his opinion, very helpful. And I think that we should take advantage of that, both with respect to what has to be done by June, but also the our review of the official community plan that has to be done by December 25. So if we can get ourselves out of those time constraints, then it seems to me that that's of benefit.
Thank you, Councilor Getty. Questions or comments from Council Morris?
I'm not in favor of doing this for a variety of reasons. One point of clarification for the planner before I talk about anything else, if possible, please. Daniel? Did you tell us at the last meeting that the province had indicated we could get a deferral and an extension of time to the land use bylaw provisions for 481 and 3 and 481.4?
Through the chair, we've had, like, since this bill was adopted in the fall, we've had many conversations with them about Bowen and us as an island municipality within the trust. I guess I'd say at times the province has discussed, potential for exemption for the provisions of Bill 44 that relate to this to the OCP and to a zoning bylaw to address the housing support issues in new housing. Those specific provisions of Bill 44.
So my question was, I understood, and I thought from reading the legislation, that one can get deferrals or exemptions on the time frame and extensions in order to do the work that's required.
The exemptions that are there are for the small scale multi-unit housing that Bowen, we're below the population threshold, so we don't have to comply with those regulations, but exemptions or extensions are possible for that.
And extensions are possible for the secondary suites and detached secondary suites?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I see our CAO with this hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted, for a point of clarity, just so it's crystal clear that we're a municipality with a population under 5,000, so there's a limited number of requirements under the Bill 44 that we would be needing to adopt. So that is to update our OCP, which we're already doing, and our housing needs assessment. It's not clear as to whether or not our current one is valid. I think we have to update it anyway. And so then the only other element is the allowance of a secondary suite on all parcels. So all of the other elements around the small scale multi-unit and increasing the number of allowable units to 3, 4, 6 units don't apply to us.
I know that, that's what I was going to say. I wanted to clarify the extension of time to do the bit for 481.3. And we are still, Bill 44 only exempts the Islands Trust from sections 481.3 and 481.4, my understanding. It doesn't exempt them from the provisions of public hearings and that sort of thing. It's only specific exemptions. So we've already got secondary suites and accessory dwelling units. One of the things we've been looking at is making the areas where those would be smaller. And so this would deal with that and give us guidance for that. You still have to prove water and septic in order to get a building permit to build your accessory dwelling unit. And it's really hard to get out of this later if we decided we didn't like the choice we've made as per one of the comments. And it's not a lot of properties, given the red map, that we would have to amend the bylaws for. And I think we've had some money given to us as well, have we not? In order to help us administer all these or bring all these things in. So it would be a very simple job for a contract planner to do our bylaw amendments. So at this point, I am not in favor of asking for exemption from sections 481.3 and 481.4 of the bylaw. And the legislation itself is very clear that 481.4 does not apply to land that is not connected to a water or sewer system provided as a service by a municipality or a regional district, or land that is larger than an acre in size. So that lets out an awful lot of our areas, the island. And the only sewer system we've got is Snug Cove Sewer District, and there's not enough capacity right now
to accommodate anything else. So I see absolutely no benefit in opting out of this, and we could end up with something we wish later we hadn't done. So I'm not in favor of asking the government to amend. And we also have secondary suites and accessory dwelling units, and all those bylaw amendments were approved by the Islands Trust and were not contrary to the Islands Trust policy statement.
Thank you, Councillor Morse. I see the planner with a response, and then Councillor Jurgensen, followed by Councillor Fast.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just really quickly, I wanted to clarify that it seems like it is possible to seek an extension for the secondary suites provision, primarily if related to infrastructure upgrades that are underway.
Thank you. Councillor Jurgensen, followed by Councillor Fast.
Press CMD plus.
Okay, two things. One first, question to the planner, through the chair. My understanding of the legislation is that if there is properties connected to the sewer the system or in the sewer area, the sewer capacity would need to be upgraded as part of the bringing conformance to this legislation. Obviously a very expensive proposition, but I just want to gain some clarity if that's correct. And then my second part is it possible, and this is not specifically to yourself, Planner Martin, but is it possible to have a temporary request a temporary exemption while we figure out how to best proceed? So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Sure. So for the first part, the immediate part that applies to Bowen is that secondary suite requirement. The provisions for the small scale multi-unit housing piece with the 3 or 4 units per lot would only apply if our population becomes over 5,000 and then in limited areas. So if that provision applied to us today, we wouldn't have the infrastructure to service that area. Whereas the areas that are currently on the municipal sewer, the Cades Hill, already permit secondary suites, so it wouldn't be affected by us, complying with the Bill 44 provisions for secondary suites.
Okay, but say we went over the 5,000 threshold next year, would we then need to upgrade the infrastructure to support those 3 or 4 units, or would it just not apply because there's no additional capacity at this time?
So it would only trigger at time of census. So within the 2026 census or the 2031 census, we were over 5,000 population. That's when it would apply. I've asked the province because currently Bill 44 has a timeline. You need to comply by a certain time, and if you don't have infrastructure, you can ask for an extension within a certain time frame. But it's just related to its adoption in 2023, so they don't at this point have those same timelines in place. Like if in 2026 we are over 5,000, what's the timeline expectation at that point? But I would imagine, before 2026 that the province would be considering that in terms of same idea. So, if today we were over 5,000, we would be asking for an extension for that provision. And if in 2026 we're in the same situation, we would be asking the province about an extension.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jurgensen. Councillor Fast.
Thank you. I'm interested to see that we're looking at the secondary suites and as the first deadline only. That's the first deadline is June 30th. To me, the more significant parts of Bill 44 are the deadlines to update the official community plan to include housing required in the housing needs report. So whatever the housing needs report says, we're required to update the OCP to meet that by December 31st, 2025. Even if we don't have the capacity to put in place all the safeguards for the natural ecosystems to support lived life on Bowen as we wish it to continue. And the same with the December 31st, 2025 deadline to update the land use bylaw to align with whatever the OCP says for housing only. The deadline is to update the OCP and the land use bylaw for housing it makes the environmental stuff secondary. And I did check with this in the writing, and there is no requirement to update the rest of the OCP or the land use bylaw, all those other things about nature and environment. The requirement of Bill 44 is only to update the housing parts. I mean, we are in a housing crisis, I agree, but we're also an island, and we have, as pointed out in the minister's letter to Salt Spring, all those constraints about available water, climate change, and those kinds of things, and the septic capacity and biodiversity, all these things. The reason I think that environment will be secondary is because of a question that was asked to Bill Bulldozer, and this was February 1st at the Local Government Leadership Academy. He was asked, which has priority, residential density or the environment? And his answer was, the province has set a mandate for local governments to provide 20 years of residential housing, natural environment, which is secondary. That's what this housing bill is all about. Not to say it's not beneficial, but I think we should be exempt like the rest of the Islands Trust in order to help slowly, carefully manage the growth so that we maintain our natural ecosystems, our water supplies and quality, and all the things that we treasure about the character, the rural nature of Bowen Island. That's what I think. I just want to look a little further into the future, not just the the secondary suites, which is June 30th, but look to the OCP and the land use bylaw, those changes that would be baked in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fest. Councillor Saunders, followed by Councillor Wake.
Thank you. To the chair, one of the, I think since I started here a year and a half ago, the word I've heard used more than any other word, both in council and in letters we receive and comments in public and everything else, is the unique character. Unique is the word that's maybe overused. If we're going to be unique, then we can't be a one size fits all. And in my mind, almost anything that a larger government does is intended for the broader audience, not for a unique character. And I think we're probably in a better position as a community to judge what's best for us. And I'm not, of course, you can't reject all legislation just because it's from the feds or the province. But I think having this ability to slow down and take a look and say, well, what really works for Bowen Island? I'd be more in favor of that. Like, I really think we need to say what works for us. We're unique. Well, we're not like any other place. We're not even like the other Islands Trust areas, right? We absolutely are unique in that sense. So we need to be able to make those decisions on our own on how these things are going to develop. And that's why I would support this motion in front of us right now.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Councillor Wade.
I'm looking at this a little higher level, and I'm not understanding the risk here. The province is not legislating how many units we're going to have and how much development. They're asking us to set targets. We're in control of setting those targets. We can work through our OCP and with all the considerations, for protection that we already have in place, and we can enshrine them in the OCP. So I don't see the risk that the province is going to make us develop more than we want to develop. And how much we develop is our decision. So that's local control. What I am concerned about is that it's clearly difficult for us to move forward on housing solutions here. And it's urgent. And we want to be able to to actually deliver on our plans to create housing. And I see this as a delay that is going to slow us down. So that's why I can't support it.
Thank you, Councillor Wick. Response from Councillor Fast.
Sure, I just, regarding it's in our control, I'm not sure that it will be because, under this bill, all municipalities and some regional districts must have an OCP that addresses a 20-year time horizon from 5 years previous. So it makes us look out 20 years at the housing needs assessment, and that's what goes into the OCP. So that's not slow, and that's not in our control. That says unless we ask for exemption, we have to have that amount of housing in there in the OCP and in the land use bylaw, basically upzoning things so that we can't make the slow decisions as the climate changes, as the transportation, everything else changes on Bowen. It is it's a bill to create housing. And my other point is, we do have a bunch of projects underway already. I'm concerned that taking on the secondary, these few little remaining ones, and some of these other things will actually, may actually distract from working on the projects, the housing projects we've already got underway. That's my take on it.
Thank you. Councillor Getty.
In answer to Councillor Waite's comments at the identifying the risk, it's the letter from the minister to Salt Spring was that if I can quote from that. The Islands Trust Act has since been amended to exempt the trust from all small-scale multi-unit housing requirements, including those for secondary suites and accessory dwelling units. This decision was made to exempt the Islands Trust from these requirements because of the trust's special mandate, preserve and protect the trust area and its unique amenities and environment, end quotes, and pre-existing limitations to critical resources like drinking water and waste disposal. If the Salt Spring Island Local Trust Committee believes it's in the best interest of their community to enable those, they can update its own zoning bylaws accordingly and follow the province's policy manual. It's my understanding that Salt Spring Island has already been exploring potential amendments to their zoning bylaw to allow for these in certain areas. So it doesn't limit it. What we're talking about is there's some confusion in terms of what applies to the small SSMHU and the secondary suites. There's some confusion locally in terms of whether or not it's just the Snug Cove area or whether it's these other areas around the island. There's potential conflict or confusion in terms of the different legislation. And it's a matter of getting us out of the deadlines, not to hinder things, but to keep us in line in terms of what our strategic plans are and what we want the planners to work on. This new funding that we've got, it doesn't limit any of that. And it's, figuring out how we can move forward at a slightly slower pace than what has been demanded and required by the province. So I don't think that the risks are high, but I think it just gives us more options in terms of getting out of the deadline.
Thank you. I've got some questions before we go to a second round. First, just on and this may require our trustees over here to put on their trustee hat for a second. With regard to Salt Spring and the local trust committee, their initial motion was to send a letter to the Minister of Housing requesting that Salt Spring be included in Bill 44, quote, as if it were a municipality with a population of greater than 10,000, marked with high importance and urgent. And I'm curious, given that local trust committee, and I had the opportunity to speak to the chair of that committee over the weekend, is comprised entirely of Islands trustees, why there was no flag that such a letter or such an opting in would be at variance with the object of the trust. Pastor, Trustee Getty.
My understanding is that what's been happening on Salt Spring is that they are divided in terms of, and quite adamantly so, in terms of housing developments. And they've had pushback both from some of their staff and a large contingent of locals. And they are in a different situation where they wanted to get exempted from this so that they could push that envelope in terms of trying to get some things through. They're just in a very different situation. They've got two trustees that don't see eye to eye on a whole lot of stuff, and they've divided the community, and it's quite a battleground. So they had decided that one way to help them was to opt in. So that was my understanding of the original motivation.
Councilor Fest.
Also, Salt Springs housing crisis, I would say, is much more extreme. They have like 100 people living on boats in Ganges Harbor. They have homeless people in the bush, lots that they can't find. Staff can't find housing to work at the hospital and the grocery store and those kinds of teachers, the basic community staff. So their housing needs are more extreme, and yet they don't have a municipality like we have that can work on some of the housing projects as well as handle infrastructure issues as they come up. Their infrastructure is all run by Capital Regional District. So they're in quite a different situation. And it's that was what they decided as a board of 3 members of the local trust committee was to they thought it would be helpful for them to be in here, but they're in a very different situation, both on the housing crisis side and as being an electoral area of the I think it's what they are anyway, of Capital Regional District.
They don't have municipal land either that they can use as a land trust in terms of helping.
Right, okay. Yes, when I think it through, Salt Spring is different than us, and they would be treated differently under the legislation as a community that's greater than 5,000, greater than 10,000. So they would be into significantly more requirements under the small scale multi-unit housing initiatives, whereas we're under 5,000 and subject, I think as we've heard, to just allowing secondary suites in a relatively confined number of zones. The challenge that I have with asking to opt out of this is, given that the requirements for the secondary suite piece are minimal and can be delayed, is the other side of it where there is the requirement to look at housing needs reports. And when we try and figure out, well, what's this community going to look like in 20 years? I can't see it being a negative to be mandated to look at a 20-year projection of housing needs and then update that every 5 years, which is currently which is what would be the requirement. I also note that Metro Vancouver at their last board meeting passed a resolution from the board to direct their staff to provide an opt-in opportunity for member jurisdictions to undertake housing needs reports, which would advance and coordinate opt-in opportunities to work with procurement of consultants for member jurisdictions, as well as advance advocacy actions to the province directed towards infrastructure programs and funding to ensure that sufficient infrastructure is in place to accommodate the increases in population and housing projected. And given that we set a terms of reference for OCP committee that I think is pretty clear and lands squarely on the notion of sustainable development. I mean, I can't imagine that our housing needs report is going to say that we should be building willy-nilly anywhere and densifying everywhere, because it has to be a part of our official community plan. So the end result for me, it feels like a bit of a net negative in that we're opting out of help and funding for Metro Vancouver to develop housing needs reports with our colleagues under the umbrella of our own PSP, that we lose the opportunity to look at developing potentially more housing. And when we look at the notion of secondary suites, it's not to say that we have no control over that. And I think some of the opportunities that would exist to us to start to regulate those in a sustainable way are looking at our conservation development policy and perhaps enshrining some of those pieces into bylaw, looking at our development permit areas, looking at some of the other tools that we have so that it's not, things just aren't built out in a way that bulldozes over the environment, but also balances the ability for British Columbians to have housing. And, you know, I think preserve and protect in my reading, and I'm not a trustee, certainly includes the environment and certainly includes conservation principles, but it also includes, and this is enshrined in the trust policy statement, some of these sociological impacts that our residents and our citizens are having. So for that reason, I'm not in support of this motion presently. Councillor Morris, were you on the list?
Yeah, no, I just lost my. I just wanted to refer to the actual legislation and the Allen's Trust. Bill 44 had a consequential amendment in it. Section 29(1)B of the Allen's Trust Act is amended by adding the following subparagraph. And that's the section that exempts them from certain things. Section 481.3. So the only thing the Allen's Trust is exempt from in Bill 44 is section 481.3. which is the two secondary suites, small and small scale multifamily. They're not exempt from the housing needs assessments for the OCP amendments, any of that stuff.
I see our planner's hand has shot up, so I'll ask Mr. Martin for his comments.
Sorry, to say for that section, the requirement to update the OCP and the land use bylaw to reflect the housing needs report is a requirement for municipalities. Only. So the requirement to do the housing needs report is for local government. So the Allen's Trust has to do their housing needs report, but to update the OCP and the zoning is specific to municipalities.
So it's not exempting from Bill 44. They're going to have to make specific amendments to the legislation.
Sorry.
They're going to have to make specific amendments to the actual legislation in the bill. It's not as simple as passing a regulation that says. Let's say. Anyhow, I'm still not supportive for all the reasons everybody else is saying.
Okay. We'll go to Councillor Jurgensen, Councillor Fast, and then I'll call the question. Councillor Jurgensen?
Press C and no row selected.
Okay, like as
notification center?
the motion presently stands, I can't support it for many of the reasons that have been stated around the table. I would be willing to support a motion that had an amendment that we opt out on the condition that we create a bylaw that works for Bowen based on Bill 44 to capture a lot of the things that we would otherwise be opting out of, but in a way that makes sense for Bowen, and I'd be supportive of an amendment to that effect, but as it stands, I can't support the current motion on the table.
Thank you, Councillor Jurgensen. Councillor Fast.
Just to answer one of the claims that was made in the about the Islands Trust Act, there was a consequential amendment made, and that's down at the bottom of this, one of the links that's in the briefing that I showed you there. And they renumbered section 47, and basically it was only section 29(1)B pertaining to local trust committees that had been amended and exempting all the other islands from Bill 44, but not Bowen. So basically it said, it amended the bit that said except for. So sections 35 to 39, where regional districts and municipalities receive direction about Bill 44, were not amended. So Bowen, I'm not sure. It's possible that Bowen's unique status as a municipality within the Islands Trust could it be overlooked? It's been a while since the Islands Trust Act was created. And
anyway, another of the options that's in briefing, I've got alternatives there at the end. We could simply inquire whether the province considered Bowen's status as the only municipality within the Islands Trust when it crafted the legislation. We could do as Councillor Jurgensen suggested, which is to ask direct staff to bring us back some recommendations that would help us in whatever way, I'm sorry, Councillor Jurgensen was suggesting there, make our own way towards the objectives in Bill 44. We could seek legal advice about how to reconcile a potential conflict between the Islands Trust Act and Bill 44, the Act, the Housing Act, or, you know, there's other options probably as well. Would we opt in of some and out of others? The sheet I've been referring to, the required timeline, this is the required timelines from Planner Martin's report Monday, February 12th. We looked at this in a council meeting, if anybody's wondering what I've been looking at here. And so this lists the different deadlines. March 31st is the first one to decide whether to opt in or opt out. To the short-term rental part only. June 30th is the one about the short-term rentals and the detached secondary suites on every property that permits single-family homes. We need to get a housing needs report. I won't read through it all, but then they go on to up until December 31st, 2028, we have to have the next housing report. So the focus is housing, as it should be in the housing bill. And but environment and the special things about the island become secondary. So I just want to end with, oops, now I've lost it. Never mind. The final paragraph in Minister Kalon's letter is kind of like a rationale for why we would opt out, because more time is needed to carefully plan the where is it? I don't have it. Okay, anyway, thank you. Here, applying the SSMUH, the short, whatever, secondary suites requirement specifically to the Salt Spring Local Trust area would require, this I think fits with Bowen, additional consultation and policy work to better understand how to balance the island's need for additional housing with the Trust's preserve and protect mandate, the island's existing infrastructure capacity issues, and the interests of local First Nations and other affected parties. And that's the minister's closing paragraph there. So I hope that we could ask for some clarification somehow or another from the province. And if this, if our motion fails, then I'll move the one of these other ones in alternatives on page 5 of the briefing.
Thank you.
One more.
I would prefer to call the question.
Well, all I want to say is I don't believe this decision is time sensitive. It's not like March 31st deadline for Bill 35.
Thank you. And with that, I will call the question, seeing that all speakers have had the opportunity to speak at least once. And all in favor of the motion on the table, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed, raise your hand, say nay.
Nay.
Nay. And the motion is defeated with Councillor Jurgensen, Councillor Wake, Councillor Morris, and Mayor Leonard in opposition. And Councillor Fassy, I believe you wanted to move one of the alternatives.
Yeah, I would like to move that council direct staff to inquire, the first alternative there on page 5, that council direct staff to inquire whether the province considered Bowen's status as the only municipality within the Islands Trust when it crafted the legislation.
I will second that motion. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, raise your hand, say nay. Is that a nay, Councillor Morris?
Well, you're going to ask it anyhow. Curiosity question, so go ahead.
Okay. So the motion is carried with Councillor Wake in opposition. Okay, moving on to, thank you, Mr. Martin, for your seat at the table. Item 6.2, Snug Cove Medical Assured Loading Policy, revised draft for review in public and stakeholder feedback. We have our bylaw services supervisor here to answer any questions. And I'll look to council to get a recommendation on the table before we start the discussion. Councilor Getty?
I don't have it in front of me, but.
Councilor Getty moves that council adopt Bowen Island Municipality Medical Assured Loading Policy number 24-02.
I would like to make an amendment, so.
Now would be the time to add it.
All right, so at the top of the policy statement, I would ask that we make a very clear announcement that this is not for emergency purposes, that if there is a medical emergency, that people should be contacting 911, and if they can, getting services in an ambulance. So that it's very clear that this is just people that are in distress and needing to get to a medical appointment, but not in an emergency.
So under policy objective or under purpose?
Possibly before the opening, before the objective, and maybe part of the objective, or at least an opening paragraph. Make it very, very clear that this is not policy for emergency situations. Came up at the transportation committee meeting. If there was an emergency, you should be calling an ambulance.
So if you were to get really specific with the language that you'd like to add, what would that sound like? So it's not for emergency purposes, or it's.
Yes, and notice with respect to okay, under objective, the objective of this policy is to provide broader access to healthcare on Bowen Island by ensuring a priority ferry boarding option is available for eligible persons traveling from Hope to Horseshoe Bay. This is not policy for medical emergencies. In that situation, you must call 911.
Okay. So the policy objective being amended to state this is not a policy for medical emergencies. Such emergencies should be referred to 911. And then the
front and center.
Front and center. So then the recommendation.
Can I have one small?
For wordsmithing, Councilor Morris, absolutely.
The objective of this policy is to provide broader access to healthcare for Bowen Island, not on Bowen Island.
Okay. So an amendment.
Sorry, I didn't catch that earlier. Yeah.
The objective of this policy is to provide broader access for healthcare on Bowen Island. So any other small pieces?
Access to healthcare for Bowen Island.
So what's going to happen is that the recommendation that's going to be moved, because it hasn't been seconded yet, is going to be the exact motion, policy number 24-02, comma, as amended.
Yeah.
Any changes from you, Councilor Wick?
My concern is the language around under the definition of the patients, page 58, be eligible for Snug Cove Medical Assured Loading. Patients must be traveling to a health-related appointment, and their medical practitioner has determined that an extended wait in the Snug Cove ferry line could cause a health concern. I think a health concern is way too vague here, and I like the word that Councilor Getty used. They need to be in distress, and having a health concern and being in distress are two different things. So I'd like to see that language changed in that line, and also in the paragraph below where for which an extended wait in the Snug Cove ferry lineup will not prolong distress or prolong pain and suffering or something.
Or will not lead to distress.
Will not lead to distress. Yeah.
The original policy had the word undue suffering.
Undue suffering, yes, that would be good.
Seeing no objections to that amendment.
Sorry, I'm just going to clarify where in the policy this
Yes.
relates.
Councilor
I'm
Wade.
not catching it.
just some clarifications to the corporate from the corporate
Just
officer.
where in the policy are you referring?
Schedule A,
Oh, in the Schedule A. Okay, I was looking in the wrong.
1A,
Okay, good.
second bullet.
Changing the health concern to undue distress. Health concern or undue distress?
I don't think you should have health concern in there. I think it should be undue.
Stress.
Well, yeah, it's distress.
Undue suffering.
I think suffering is better.
Undue suffering is.
All right, we're getting a little squirrely here, so. Counselor Fast and then Counselor Getty.
Thank you. I'm just concerned that we're changing wording in the bylaw that staff crafted and then took out for consultation and then edited it. So I'd like to hear whether the bylaw officer has any concerns about changing the words from the health concern to the whatever's there now.
This was a section we obviously went back and forth on quite a bit. And I think we did in the end deliberately choose not to. I think, we're looking at a concern with a health concern seeming too vague, but undue suffering or distress is almost too specific or too subjective. So we preferred more open-ended language, and we'll leave it to the medical practitioner to determine that themselves, because ultimately, at the end of the day, they have the determination.
So what I've understood from some of the medical community is it's easier for them to make a judgment call on what undue suffering is than it is on what a health concern is. And if it's simply a health concern, we can have all kinds of people arguing, that they really need to go right now, when really it's not about the timing, it's about their convenience to get there. And if they had to wait one more ferry, they just.
Yeah, I think the language we've used here is clear that the purpose of this is to address not the convenience, but the actual the health concerns of having to have an extended time in the ferry. That's spelled out pretty clearly in that section there. That's the focus.
But don't you think we're putting the onus on the medical practitioner to make that call when it's.
Yeah, we are.
If I may, Mayor.
Yes.
Ultimately, it's the medical practitioner that's going to make the determination whether you're going to call it suffering, health concern. I don't know that really matters, but the medical health practitioner is going to be the one that's saying this should not have to wait for a ferry lineup or wait for the next ferry. But from what I'm hearing from our bylaw officer is that this was debated back and forth significantly, and they agreed to land on health concern.
We can always amend it if it gets abused.
Sure. I'm just process-wise, so Council Wake has proposed an amendment.
Can I see the motion? I'm wondering, I lost track of the other amendments. What does it say now? Or maybe it would be better by word so Councillor Jurgensen can hear too.
Amending the policy, not the motion.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
So the policy has been amended at the objective to include a sentence that says, this is not a policy for medical emergencies. Such emergencies should be referred to 911. And then we are now debating a second amendment that has not been solidified.
Which is in eligibility under 1A, patients to be eligible for snug code medical assured loading, patients must, and in the second bullet point, the medical practitioner has determined that an extended wait in snug code ferry lineup could cause a health concern, which is it is currently, replace health concern or replace a health concern with undue distress. Councilor Getty, and then I might just take a vote on this to move us along.
Through the bylaw, there was specific wording for the BC Ferries medical assisted loading in terms of a letter from a medical practitioner. And did we adopt that in terms of health concern, or was there something more?
Yeah, that's on the end of the schedule. The only change we made was to sort of mention of the TAP program. That's about.
So if somebody wants to get this, they have to go to the medical practitioner, and then that person has to say, you know, if you're going to your cancer treatment and you're in pain, then you don't have to wait for an extra sailing if there's an overload. And to avoid that, come up, you get the letter or the signs, and you have the letter, and that entitles you to get into this fast track.
Yeah, that letter will
And
work
it's up
for
to
us, and that'll also work for
Yeah.
BC Ferries.
Okay, but it's the practitioner then that has to make the judgment call in terms of what the situation is. Patient goes to the doctor and says, or the nurse practitioner and says, this is hell and I need some help, and they get the letter.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor Jurgensen.
Press C and D.
One thing that I don't, and perhaps I'm missing it in the policy, but one thing that I was fairly concerned about with the policy is that
Looks like you're done talking.
there
so
is
lower your hand in 8
the,
seconds. Zoom us.
there is the what seems to be unintended
And lowered.
consequence here, and perhaps this isn't the purpose of the policy. But for example, if someone needs to go into a medical appointment because they have are able to get a specialist appointment only on a specific day at a specific time, they're already having to take time off work and what could be a very medically challenging, time of their lives, of course, and having to take off additional time just to make sure they can get in to the appointment and not get overloaded, I would have thought would have been captured by this policy, to not create extra undue hardship for those types of situations. And I'm just wondering if I can get some clarification on whether that was considered as part of this policy, and if so, kind of what some of the decisions were that led to it being not in the policy.
He did consider that. He chose to keep the focus pretty much the same as it's been since the inception of the program 14, which was to reduce the suffering of someone for whom a sit in the ferry lineup is going to be problematic. That remains the focus. We had to consider a few different aspects, such as we don't have very much space available for this program physically to use the program. So we focused on that aspect of the policy, and we've maintained it that way to date.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councilor Wake, and then we'll deal with this amendment and move on.
So that example was actually a good example of what the concern I've heard is. But I think we've had a good discussion about it, and I'm prepared to withdraw my amendment.
Any objection to the amendment being withdrawn? Seeing none, that passes by unanimous consent. Any other amendments? So the motion, which has not yet been seconded by Councilor Getty, is that Council adopt Bowen Island Municipality Medical Assured Loading Policy number 2402 as amended.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councilor Fast. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Audio now.
That carries unanimously. Moving on to, thank you, Mr. Woods. Moving on to item 6.3, short-term rental. We have our manager of planning and development here today.
I'm going to recuse myself from this discussion because I actually am in conflict because I operate an Airbnb cottage.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Wake. We will let you know when the discussion of this position. Over to you, Ms. Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. As the Mayor said, we're here today talking about short-term rentals on Bowen Island. So staff last presented to Council January 8th, 2024. Council referred the short-term rental policy review to the Housing Advisory Committee, the Economic Development Committee, for recommendation to inform Council's decision on whether or not to opt into the provincial legislation, Bill 35, and directed staff to undertake public engagement. So I'm here tonight to present to you the results of that engagement referral and to present options and recommendations. So the Economic Development Committee discussed the referral January 31st, recommended Council not opt in at this time. The Housing Advisory Committee met January 12th and recommended Council not opt in to the restrictions in Bill 35 at this time. In terms of public responses, we mailed brochures to about 1,500 households, so that wide mail out. We conducted an online survey which received 956 responses. As of March 11th, we received 53 letters to Mayor and Council, and you'll see more in your on-table package. And we conducted in-person and 2 virtual open houses and received a total of 77 attendees, some of whom attended multiple open houses. This is just an overview of some of the survey questions. You'll see an attachment too that just provides some highlights. So about 80% of the respondents said that they are full-time residents of Bowen. And then the other extreme 9.5% said that they're visitors to Bowen Island. We asked short-term rental operators, how do you think the unit would be used if we were not operating a short-term rental? And obviously people can answer more than one question, but saw quite a range from I would leave it vacant, I would continue to use the vacation property, I would sell it, I would rent it out, I would continue to live there full time. So quite a mix of responses. We asked the public, to what extent are you supportive or not supportive of short-term rentals operated on Bowen? And we saw about 60% of Bowen residents are supportive of short-term rentals, either very supportive or moderately supportive. And about 30% are either moderately or very unsupportive. Short-term rentals. I'll say this is short-term rentals in general, so not specific to the principal residence requirement, but just to the operation of short-term rentals on Bowen. Asked people how they felt that since we adopted short-term regulations in 2019, how effective have they been? Those regulations been? So 40% yes, and they should stay the same. Or 27% said yes, they've been effective, but should be changed, improved. 14% of people said short-term rentals should be banned on Bowen, and 4.3% were saying that the regulation should be removed and we should not be regulating short-term rentals. And then this was sort of one of the key questions: do you think Bowen Island municipality should opt into provincial legislation? I'll say this answer is just selecting the people who said that they're either residents or owners on Bowen. So we are not including those 9.5% of the visitors to Bowen in this response, but 42% said yes, 50% said no, 5% no, the regulation should be changed, and 2.2% said other. And I'll say to you, for this question and some of them, staff went in and did change some of the responses. If you look at just the raw data, which we have on our website, in terms of some people clicked other and would say, yes, you should opt in 100%. We meant to say yes, and so we did those responses. Through the engagement, we identified 4 sort of ranges of options for council to consider. So no change, provincial adoption, municipal review, or future changes or monitoring. So obviously no change would be saying the regulations stay the same. This option would take no action for council, no resolution would be necessary. The second one being to choose to opt into provincial legislation on March 31st, so it would come into effect by November 1st. For this one, council would write this is the recommended action that's in your agenda. So that's the third one, looking around, reviewing regulations on short-term rentals. And so the first option identified there is that council could direct staff to amend our land use bylaw and business license bylaw requirements so that residential guest accommodation would need to be operated by a resident or a principal resident of the dwelling level. So essentially mirroring those provisions of Bill 35, but not taking the step to opt in. So this would mean in the future going forward that the Bowen would enforce similar restrictions to which the province would be restricting other places in the province. But it would not opt in, so the province would not be enforcing it, and would give them the flexibility for council to do things like issue temporary use permits for things that do not comply with that regulation. Second would be amending short-term rental policy and land use bylaw regulations to address other concerns. So we saw in the survey and through the engagement, other concerns with short-term rentals. So just even looking at the comments on the survey, some people have concerns with, ongoing noise complaints or, parking issues with short-term rentals. We received some concerns about, for example, the scale of bed and breakfast that we allow in residential areas. So all of those could be the focus of future review of short-term rentals, and that can be conducted with or without deciding to opt in to Bill 35. And this third one, currently we regulate RGAs and B&Bs differently in terms of requirements, so in terms of license fee and licensing requirements can be quite different. So this could just be looking to bring those two different types of short-term rentals in alignment. And then finally, option 4, future changes. So saying we're not sure about a decision at this point. We want to monitor. We want to report back in December with the idea, March 2025, and like decide to opt in. And as I said, the recommendation in the agenda is that second option, so to opt into the provincial requirement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. And I will open up the floor to questions for the planner. Over to you, Councillor Saunders.
Questions for the planner or just comments?
Well, let's do both. I'm sure this will be a robust conversation.
Thank you. No actual questions of the planner here. Just brief comments on the opt-in, opt-out. There's a reason small communities have been given the option to choose to come in or come out is because they're not the same as the larger communities. And got our own unique, I get to say it too. We've got our own issues and they're very different from most other municipalities. And while I recognize that there's certainly housing challenges, I think we're all aware of that. One of the notes in Planner Martin's comments were that if we don't opt in, staff will prepare policy options that can be considered. My experience in the year and a half we've been doing this is that staff here are extremely knowledgeable and work really hard, well beyond what I would have expected coming in. And I have a lot of confidence that the policy options that could be considered, including some of the ones that were shown just there, would be well considered and probably really fruitful and useful to us. By not opting in, I think it allows us to see how it's working in other places, other jurisdictions, because we can always opt in next year or the year after whenever we see fit if we choose to. And it'll also allow us to develop rules and regulations and policies that are consistent with our particular needs here. So when I look at the commentary, the reasons that staff's option is to, or staff recommend to opt in, looking at the 4 reasons there, and just briefly on each of them, the impact, the impact on the housing market. So academic studies are cited there, but I noticed that there, at least 2 of the major ones were from Boston and Barcelona, which don't really fit for me. I don't see the value of something from that. If we had a study on the housing market of a similar jurisdiction, that would probably, and I'm certain that we can get to that over time. That's fine. The impact on people, certainly, there is going to be some impact on people without question, opting in or opting out. But the recommendation here indicates that, there's a lot of concerns from Bowen residents, and we've received a lot of letters saying we need to opt in, and we have, and they're valid concerns. And I understand every one of them. We've actually received, we've received just as many or more that are saying, no, don't opt in. In fact, that survey that was there indicated over 50% of people that responded, and that's, I believe it was over 900 people responded. So that's a significant response. The desire for provincial enforcement. Yeah, I get that argument, but we can add teeth to our bylaws. I think if we choose to, or add more teeth to them if we choose to. Finally, distortion of the market, potential for other places to invest on Bowen. That's a very real problem. It's been cited by an awful lot of people in their interest in opting in. That, and in fact, it was in the public comments today. People commented that, we're just inviting developers. If I was a developer and this was hanging out there knowing that the island could opt in next year or the year after or whatever we felt was necessary, once we'd studied and thought what we decided what we think was best for our market, for our communities, I would find it pretty risky to be building development intending to Airbnb it or short-term rental it, not knowing the direction that the island was going. I don't think that choosing to not opt in at this point in time signals anything at all other than we want to study the matter more. I'm not saying we shouldn't somewhere down the road opt in. I'm saying that I think we need to really have a longer look at it and see how this will impact us and see how opting in is actually impacting other communities that are similar to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Councillor Jurgensen, Councillor Morse.
Well, I definitely agree that there is a housing shortage and something needs to be done, and there is negative effects of short-term rentals when not managed correctly. In some business scenarios, especially where their principal residents' oversight would be helpful to mitigating some of those concerns. I do also think that there is a big difference between a family who vacations on Bowen for a significant portion of the year versus a developer who just comes in and wants to be very hands-off and just run an Airbnb. I think there's a very big difference in that, and I think we need to be careful about how we approach the situation to make sure that we can capture the nuance of that.
Thank you, Councillor Jurgensen. Councillor Morse.
Lost my piece of paper with my notes. So very first point, we don't have hotels. I totally agree with everything Councillor Saunders said. I don't think we should be opting in at this point in time. I think we should be waiting to see what happens. It's going to be very hard to get out once we've opted in. We're talking about wanting to collect an MRDT to fund affordable housing. Well, if you get rid of 32 units, you've got rid of a big kind of potential MRDT, but that's just a side comment. I think the people that frequent the STRs, they contribute to the viability of the business on Bowen. I think a lot of our businesses, if we didn't have those people that stay overnight, that, they're there for time to shop and stuff. It's what we used to call value-added tourism. We don't need to opt in to get the services of the provincial bylaw regulations, except perhaps for very one small part. Anybody who's operating, whether we opt in or not, is going to have to register with the province. And in my reading the guidebook, I think the registration requirements you're going to have to, they're going to come after people that aren't registered or haven't filled the form out correctly or aren't following what they said they were going to do. We've already got a fairly restrictive policy for short-term rentals, not B&Bs. They're not bound by it, but they have to be operated by a resident on the property. And for the residential guest accommodation, they can only do it for 120 days. They have to have a 24/7 contact on the app that's available 24/7 to deal with any problems. Looking at the noise complaints section of the bylaws, which has considerably dropped. And, in talking to people that use them and knowing people that come, they're not trashing our island, and they're contributing to our island. I remember an article that was written in Maclean's many years ago by Alan Fotheringham about my island because he rented a place at Hood Point for a month every year. We can get all the data, whether we opt in or not. So I'm not in favor of opting in at this point. I think we need to at least wait a year. We don't need to rush. find ourselves in something we don't want. And I'm having real trouble with Schedule 8, trying to understand how many potential, we're going to be forcing families who've had vacation properties on this island for decades and generations to sell property. Just because they're not going to rent it out. It's a lot of the places that are rented are only rented in the summer because they're not insulated and the water lines will freeze and all that stuff. So you're not necessarily going to be creating a lot of extra housing. And if you're thinking that somebody's going to rent a waterfront house for $1,500 a month, you're probably whistling Dixie. So I don't think it's going to solve our housing problem at all. And it could end up with a lot more.
Thank you, Councilor Morse. Councilor Fast.
Thank you. I'm in support of the staff recommendations. And first off, can I make the motion and then speak my piece?
Let's clear the speakers list first. I've got comments I'd like to make as well.
All right, then I'll start. I think this is a one-time chance to kind of gain some control over tourism on Bowen. This is a little different from the previous motion that we spent a bunch of time on. In that I'm interested in opting in to this one. That's my interest because the time constraints on this are so pressured. We have to respond soon, and if we don't opt in, then we've got another year of individuals deciding whether they want to invest or create short-term vacation rentals on Bowen, when they can't do it anymore in Squamish or Vancouver or all these other communities around us, and you don't have the speculation tax or the vacancy tax. So it sort of creates a target, I see it on Bowen, that as a pressure from developing more short-term vacation rentals. And excuse me, somebody have a comment back there? Okay, I'm concerned about increasing cars, visitors, tourism. We've just had a big community discussion about the overnight use possibilities on Cape Roger Curtis, and I think it's that similar kind of pressure on the cove and infrastructure that I'm concerned about as well. I think we should be thinking about the community first, not individuals, as hard as it is to find succession for family cottages, like family farms and all kinds of properties of that nature. I sympathize, but I think my commitment is to the community first, the broader community. And what we heard in the official community plan last time we updated it was that affordable housing was one of the dominant community themes at that time. Affordable housing was a need, and that was before the short-term vacation rentals of principal residences came in. I think I've mentioned most of my points that I'm going to make now, but I was particularly struck by this idea of, this is in the letter from John Parker, who's the former chair of the Community Economic Development Commission, that the essence of economic prosperity in small communities like ours is to create a great place to live. And that's where I'm coming from mainly, and long-term rentals are what we need. And so I'm in favor of opting in. Thank you.
Councilor Fast? Councilor Kitty?
My understanding is that when we brought in the regulations in 2019 and 2020, the previous council, that they were going to be reviewed and brought back before council to see whether or not there were problems. That hasn't happened. So now we're forced into the situation in terms of this issue, whether to opt in or not, we're looking at. And there have been problems. So I live in the same area that John Parker lives in, and I also have a couple of, I consider to be good friends, who have the a little cottage that's been in the family for a great long time, or they've owned for a great long time. They made a number of improvements. And they're very, very careful about who they rent to. They interview people and they, tell them about the neighborhood, and they make sure that if they're not there, there's somebody else there that these people can contact and all the rest of it. But for those 2 or 3 out of the 32, I don't know how many are problematic, but of those, it seems to be off-island investors that don't appreciate the community. And those are places where there are stag parties and there are fireworks go off in the drought in the middle of the summer. And there are all sorts of other issues that, you can go running over and ask them to cease and desist, and they just blow you off. And you don't get a reply from bylaw because it's the weekend, and you don't get a reply from the police officers because it's a noise complaint and they're not interested. So we're put in between a rock and a hard place in terms of there's some very good responsible operators and there's a couple of bad apples. That's always a situation where the regulations start to kick in. I've also heard anecdotally, and I haven't been able to double check, that there was somebody that was putting an offer in on a house that has a business and wants to get out of the rental market and own property, and they were outbid by an off-islander who was investing and wanting to run a short-term rental. So it does have an effect there is an effect on the housing market. It's not going to be huge and profound, but it does exist. And there is, from time to time and in various places, depending on the people, there's a negative effect on the neighborhood. And if this grows, and the comments in terms of how Squamish and Sechelt have opted in, and they want to have the principal residence. If we're still out, then yeah, if investors are looking for property to accommodate the massive population of Vancouver and all the visitors that we get, there's going to be potentially some fairly significant additional interest there. So I don't accept the idea that if we opt in, we're going to destroy the economy and we're going to destroy, families are not being able to, and people having to sell. And I don't know that we're necessarily creating that level of hardship, but I think that that's salesmanship in terms of that argument, as opposed to, I don't know that if I had a place and I wasn't able to rent it anymore, that would be my only option. So I think that
Sorry, Mr. Melhorn, the time for public comments is passed. Thank you.
I need to, if there was some way that we could, I suppose, really start to beef up some of our regulations. And I don't know how we could do that to protect against, the troublemakers. But I think without that option, that there's advantages to this that I think are apparent. Just on balance.
Thank you, Councilor Getty. So comments from this chair. So my thoughts and ultimate decision on this is informed by a number of factors. So there's I'll note that when I started to dig into the materials, this isn't new work that we're doing here. And I was able to review and read policies from our neighboring communities, from Gibsons and Sechelt and some of the Islands Trust Islands, even our neighbors from municipalities in Metro Vancouver, including City of Vancouver, which already has a principal residence requirement. And looking into decisions recently made by Tofino, who was requested to opt in, and other communities that are coastal communities, are island communities that are disproportionately affected by tourism, unlike some of our other neighbors in the region. I've also had the opportunity to speak to leaders of those islands and leaders of those municipalities to get their rationale and decision-making for some of their decisions around short-term rentals. And ultimately discovering that, while I think our policy currently is a good one, it is also less restrictive than many of the other communities that are feeling the pressures of tourism, that are feeling the pressures of use on island and infrastructure. And in coming down to a decision to support the staff recommendation, for me, it's really a line of, in terms of zoning, from a municipal standpoint, in terms of zoning, what is the line between a commercial use and a residential use in a zone? And it's taken a lot of back and forth in my mind in the dialogue that I've had with the materials I've read and the dialogue I've had with the other political electeds that I've spoken to. And, I believe that a principal residence requirement is really partly where that line is. And what is the difference in a neighborhood, a residentially zoned neighborhood, between what is ultimately a residential use versus a commercial use? I'll note by opting in, so one of the, who this doesn't affect are the over 100 RGA providers and B&B providers who live in a home either with themselves or their families that have a suite that they want to put to use in their primary residence to offset mortgage costs, to offset the cost of living on the island. I also am encouraged by the province's decision in that this is one of the few areas where we get to upload a service to the province. I mean, for the last number of decades, the amount of responsibility that has been downloaded to municipalities from the federal and provincial governments is huge. And our ability to upload things like enforcement and data collection, in this case, is a bit of a benefit. Upload speeds are always slower than download speeds, and this is for me a benefit of opting in. I am sympathetic to residents who are, or non-residents who are operating residential guest accommodations in their homes currently. I believe some of my comments in public so far have been that those properties already are exempt from the speculation and vacancy tax. Those are, many of those properties don't carry mortgages. They have appreciated in value incredibly over the last number of decades. And there are vehicles to and mechanisms to offset the cost of carrying those properties that simply aren't available to folks that don't have homes to begin with. Do I think that this is a be-all and end-all solution to the housing problem? It's not. And then that's why I think when we look at the provincial and federal levels and the moves that have been moved by our neighbors, that this is one thread of many that needs to be woven together to solve the housing and affordability crisis. When I look at other markets, such as those in Gibsons and Sechelt and Vancouver, I am loath to create to be a low water mark, to create an environment that promotes speculation and investment on this island. And, the other piece that I'll note is that there's been lots of ink spread, I think, about the notion of tourism on the island and how important tourism is on the island. And I don't doubt that. And I think the need is to balance the needs of residents and the needs of future residents and the needs of current residents who are being forced to move off the island with the needs of tourism. And I believe that this strikes that balance. We know
your hotels.
Sorry. If you'd like to make comments, there is a public comment process. You also have the ability to write Mayor and Council. This is a proceeding of council. So at this point, I would request silence from the gallery, or you're free to leave the room. Thank you. Where was I? Yeah, it was really around creating a market for investment. So we would become a low water mark in based on our neighbors. It's just not something that I'm comfortable doing when residents contribute to the economy in a year-round way, and that would be continued. Okay. With that, Councillor Fast, so the speaking list has been cleared. If you do want to make the motion, you are available to do so now.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to move.
So then you can speak to the motion.
I'd like to move the staff recommendation that council write to the Ministry of Housing requesting to opt in to the principal resident requirement in Bill 35, and that council direct staff to amend the land use bylaw, business license bylaw, and bylaw notice enforcement bylaw to include principal residence requirement for the residential guest accommodation use.
Moved by Councillor Fast, seconded by Councillor Getty. Over to you for discussion, Councillor Morris.
It's a question of clarification. My understanding is we would still get all the data and all the provincial enforcement up to the extent of, because everybody still has to register whether we opt in or not. You're providing short-term accommodation and you're required to register. My other concern is that we will be inadvertently picking up, which I forgot to mention, the Davies Orchard cottages and the cottages that at the marina and the float homes at the marina, because they fit the definition of short-term rental accommodation service.
Maybe I'll look to the planner for a response to those.
Sure. So for the first point, the province has said that yes, they'll be sharing the data with municipalities regardless of opt-in, but they will not be doing enforcing. Not be enforcing the principal resident requirement on Bowen unless we opt in, right? They enforce it first.
People having to register and all the other things.
I mean, yeah, potentially registration, but they won't be enforcing non-compliance. Second one being our commercial guest accommodation, whether the principal residence requirement would apply. I would say I think it's not clear to me to what extent the province would consider that zone, the commercial guest accommodation, as a short-term rental under the Act. The Act has exemptions for things like hotels and motels. So I think we would be making the case to the province that that is essentially our equivalent hotel or motel, like commercial accommodation zone. But it's not clear. I don't know. I don't have a determination from the province what their interpretation.
So that's one other reason why, being that uncertainty, that I think we should wait on. This is not an appropriate time to elect opt in.
Thank you. Councillor Saunders.
Thank you. I just want to respond to what comments from Councillor Fast. First of all, I really truly respect the when people have the opinion that opting in is the right thing to do here, because I've been wavering back and forth on this for several weeks as I read the material, not really sure where I was going to, which side of the fence I was going to come out on. There's really good arguments on both sides, I think. But just a couple of comments. One was comparing this to the CRC discussions. I think it's not apt. I mean, that was talking about hundreds or even thousands of people traveling on. Here we're talking about 25 to 30 homes. So I don't see the comparison there. But I think the other thing, I take exception to the implication that people choosing not to opt in are somehow less interested in the community than everybody else is. We're all interested in this community. I just wanted to make that point, that the fact that I'm personally saying, I don't think I would support the staff recommendation here. I'm still interested in community, and so is everybody else. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Councillor Fast.
Thank you. I take your point, Councillor Saunders. I didn't mean you. I meant outside investors who don't live in the community is who I was trying to speak to. And I would note that there has been a study that the province did of surveying local communities and what were the impacts. And that one did say that I know because somebody on Islands Trust was also, on Keeps actually, was participated in that on behalf of Islands Trust.
And that study did find that presence of short-term vacation rentals, the principal dwelling, did have an effect on availability of affordable housing, long-term rentals, and sorry, not affordable, but long-term rentals. And that's something that the province is relying on in terms of them creating this. And anyway, I'll stop.
I appreciate your response. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further speakers, I will call the question. All in favor of the recommendation on the table, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, raise your hand, say nay.
Nay.
The motion carries with Councillor Saunders and Councillor Morris in opposition. Thank you, Mr. Martin. Yes, let's take without objection, we'll take a recess for 5 minutes and get Councillor Wake back in the.
Audio now. Oh, he's gone.
So we'll come back at 3:26.
Audio now.
Oh, yeah, Marie? Just wanted to see if I could do about that letter, because I'm always confused that it, loading the. Okay. Oh, no.
See.
I don't know what's happening to us. We're usually not split on things. It's been a.
It's split kind of day. Tough decisions and
Yeah. Well, I get it.
everybody's doing their own thinking and we should be sort of split sometimes, I think.
As long as it doesn't,
Reflecting.
long as it doesn't animosity, so.
No.
But I think this one was, and that one, you know, John said it.
Let's see if the lineup went down.
This one good.
A lineup with that? Is there still a lineup?
Yep. You weren't here, you should have used the washroom with that chair.
Busy watching.
Energy certainly changed. It's all like a parking lot, you know?
We'll have folks on Zoom.
But that didn't keep it from, didn't it? The fellow that's over in, I was thinking here. Chris Melvin.
Melvin.
Yeah, Chris, yeah.
Oh, he's got a very nice big one.
I want to ask him, where did he hit 44%? Losing 44% of the economy.
Yeah.
32.
It's not 44%.
Not 44%.
Oh,
If we're going
it's
by-
44%, it's 78.
What's 78?
78 is the residential guest accommodation total and 44, 32
Okay,
of
but
those
what about all?
are not principal residents.
What about bed and breakfast?
I didn't stay in bed and breakfast if I was traveling with my kids.
Nobody's asking
is
you
still
whether
live.
you would or wouldn't stay in the bed and
I
breakfast.
wouldn't,
No,
because
we're not asking you whether you would or you wouldn't.
Okay, guess we're still on, yeah, we're still live.
Thank you.
black binder, where did I put it?
We're all back. Everybody's here. Councillor Jurgensen, are you with us?
To repair.
Yes,
Okay. We will reconvene this meeting. We are finished with 6.3 unless there were any additional motions. No, 6.3. Councillor Wake is back with us. So 7.1, amendment to the Snug Cove Sewer Outfall Replacement Loan Authorization Bylaw number 626, 2024. We have our Chief Financial Officer here with us.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the mayor to the rest of council. This is a housekeeping amendment to the bylaw. In the next few days, the notice of intent will be sent to all property owners in the Snug Cove Sewer District regarding a petition process for loan authorization to borrow up to $1.2 million in order to replace the sewer outfall. Originally, the bylaw which came before council required that the loan be repaid over a term of 30 years. And in doing the math on this and looking at the 5-year financial plan for the sewer, there is room in the sewer budget, once the internal debt to the general fund is repaid, just to take that amount of debt servicing and include it without raising fees or adding new parcel taxes or anything. Now, looking at that $1.2 million, if we look long-term and amortize that over 30 years, there's quite a significant amount of additional interest that will be paid for by those people, as well as locking in that borrowing capacity for a longer amount of time. So really, it just makes sense to shorten that amortization period a little bit and request that the debt be repaid over a 20-year period instead of 30. So my recommendation to council is to read the amended bylaw, which includes a change in the clause to do the amortization period over 20 years instead of 30.
Thank you. Can I have someone move the recommendation, please? And then we'll have a discussion. Councillor Saunders?
Whereas the council meeting January 8, 2024, council read Bowen Island Municipality Snug Cove Sewer or Replacement Loan Authorization Bylaw 626, 2024, first, second, and third time. And whereas council wishes to amend the bylaw to reduce the loan repayment from 30 to 20 years, therefore be resolved in council rescind third reading of Bowen Island Municipality Snug Cove Sewer Outfall Replacement Loan Authorization Bylaw number 626, 2024. And be it further resolved that Bowen Island Municipality Snug Cove Sewer Outfall Replacement Loan Authorization Bylaw 626, 2024 be read a third time as amended.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Wake. Questions and discussion, please. Councillor Saunders, for the motion.
Just a couple of quick questions. The explanation that you gave us about the 20 years to 30 years and paying, the significant cost and how it won't result in a further fee to people that are involved. Is that explained in the petition? Like to some extent, would the petition that goes out to say, and here's why?
The petition is going to include a subsequent follow-up kind of document that I'm writing, which is going to explain all of that.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. And then just follow up to that. What are our options if the petition failed? Just go ahead with 30-year loan?
No, any amount of borrowing needs to have authorization. So if there is no approval from the local service area, then council's going to have to consider internal financing. Look, the work has to get done. It's an environmental regulatory requirement. It has to get done.
Right.
If the loan is approved, then we can stretch that repayment out over a 20-year period. If it's not approved, we still have to do the work. We're going to have to figure out a way to pay for it internally, and that's going to require a shorter amount of time to repay that loan.
Thank you.
Seeing no further comments, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And
Aye in favor.
that carries unanimously. Item 8.1 under staff reports, the status update on the Snug Cove Wastewater Treatment Plant Phase 1 financing. Again, over to the CFO.
Thank you. This again sort of follows on the first report with regard to the length of time for the financing for the project. But this report is really to close the loop on a council resolution that was passed in 2022. That resolution, it was number 2022-383, and it directed the CFO to amend the financing plan to pay for the final costs on the Snug Cove Sewer Wastewater Treatment Plant upgrade and report back to council. So this is an information report only. It is to provide council with a fulsome report of the all-in project costs to do the upgrade, as well as what the terms are for the repayment to the general fund. So initially, under the parcel tax bylaw that was adopted, the sewer fund was paying an annual amount of just over $102,000 back to the general fund over a period of 7 years. With the final costs in, that amount is being amended to $111,000 per year for the remaining 5 years. So this is where we're saying that the Snug Cove Sewer Outfall project can be funded and that debt servicing paid for, because when this internal debt expires in 5 years, that amount of money can then be used to repay the long-term loan, and we won't have to increase or add additional parcel taxes at that time.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions on this one for the CFO? Councillor Morse?
So we went over budget a bit and we've had to pay a bit more. Am I reading this correctly?
The Director of Engineering at that meeting, where the resolution was passed, came to council to report that the costs were a little bit increased, they needed extra money, and that's the final cost all in. Originally, the budget was $1,640,000.
And you've chosen to apportion the costs, you overrun on the same percentages as you did the original.
Yes.
So I will object to that again. I don't think any of it should have been charged to us, general taxpayers.
Councillor Morse? Can I have a motion on the floor, please? Councillor Fast.
I move that council receive for information the report from the chief financial officer, status update on the Snug Cove wastewater treatment plant financing dated March 4th, 2020.
Moved by Councillor Fast, seconded by Councillor Saunders. Any further discussion? Councillor Getty?
The portion of the costs of the upgrades to the sewer district was the subject of the ombudsman's report. So, and coming from that, it was supposed to be a recommendation for policy with respect to use of the general trust or the surplus. So is that happening?
It's still on the work list. It just hasn't been brought back to council yet.
Okay, so I have no objection to receiving for information. I just raised those concerns still.
It's well stated. Thank you for raising that. Seeing no further comments or questions, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. And 8.2, 2024 budget progress report, again, over to our CFO.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the mayor to the rest of council, I seek from you today a direction to draft the 5-year financial plan bylaw for 2024 to 2028. The financial plan bylaw includes a property tax revenue increase not to exceed 9.5% for 2024 over 2023. A 9.5% property tax increase for an average property owner would equate to about $317 per year. That is for a property owner owning an average property of just over $1.5 million. Some of the background on what we have done with the draft bylaw to date is it has been presented to the Finance Advisory Committee on December 8th. It was presented publicly again at the Committee of the Whole on December 13th. We had 2 Zoom open house, more informal type meetings, one held on January 18th, one held on January 25th. We did get very relatively little public feedback this year. The feedback that we did get wanted to raise the council's awareness of the impact and the hardship that 9.5% property tax increase could present for some people. There have been several changes implemented to the draft financial plan bylaw based on some new developments. We've got some new grant funding and we've got some additional expenses that we are determining need to be included in the bylaw department. We have included provision to add auxiliary ferry marshals. We're looking at having ferry marshaling and bylaw coverage for the weekends this year. So we have included some things there. We've had some things that are bringing it down a little bit. They're all quite sort of detailed in some of the body of the report. I plan to update the budget information webpage with the new draft bylaw, as well as a new full budget report to accompany the information. And in the meantime, I would just seek council direction to bring forth a budget bylaw for 2024 to 2028 that includes the 9.5% tax increase, which will support critical infrastructure investments and enable us to maintain our existing levels of service.
Any council for any questions or comments? Councillor Fast, followed by Councillor Morse.
Thank you for this. Is this the first time we've seen the contributions to reserves laid out so clearly? No. Okay, no.
This material is all included in the material that you were presented with at the committee of the whole.
Oh, yeah. No, I just mean, it just seems like this year we've got more information about how we're building up reserves for the infrastructure of the future, and I really appreciate that. It's a little different to me. It might just be a format thing, I don't know. And, but I thought anyway, more detail was clearer to me. And thank you for that. And I'm in support, and I would just note that the library's in here and all the other things people can look through and make sure that that everything's covered. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Post. Over to Councillor Morse.
So the draw from capital replacement and renewal fund is 840,000. I think I just saw that somewhere. Yeah, 840. And on the document we got back in, I guess, when we had the nice little spreadsheet that went this way, it was 838. So you just rounded it up?
Just rounded it up.
Okay. And I guess I have a question. In there was 213,000 and change for the Eagle Cliff culverts and fire hydrants.
Mhm.
Fire hydrants are something new. So I don't think they fit under the definition of capital renewal and replacement fund. Which I think I might have wasted the time.
You know, I'm sorry, I don't have it exactly in front of me if those particular funds were being used to fund the Eagle Cliff portion of the project. There is a municipal contribution to the Eagle Cliff project that requires the municipality to fund the culverts.
Yeah, the culverts I have no problem with because it is a renewal.
Yeah. I believe that the majority of the capital replacement renewal reserve is going to fund the Corner Road Bridge project.
Yes, it is. Again, I don't believe we should be using the renewal and replacement fund for anything new.
But the material you have in front of you.
Yeah. Doesn't give me any details.
It doesn't indicate that 840 is being used or any portion of that is being used to fund the Eagle Cliff project, but I can certainly get you the capital allocation of how I've used those funds, how I've allocated those funds.
Well, I was just going on the basis of this report that you gave us before. And it totals to 838,000 and 213,279.
Yes, I did do some reallocation of funding in the capital.
So it really would be appreciated to know which pot all these things are being funded out of.
Okay, I can add that with the next draft that comes forward.
Fast.
I'd like to move the motion.
Absolutely.
I'd like to move that council direct the chief financial officer to draft the 2024-2028 5-year financial plan bylaw, which includes a municipal property tax revenue increase not to exceed 9.5% over the 2023 municipal levy.
Moved by Councillor Fast, seconded by Councillor Getty. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Watson. Moving on to 8.3, an update from our CAO, a very brief update, hopefully. Condensed.
Brief as
sharp
possible, and I'll say that I don't have any updates.
Okay, thank you.
Brief enough.
Moving on to 9.1, a request for support for application to the Japanese Canadian Legacy Society for a heritage site, Bowen Island Museum and Archives. We have a councillor willing to make those.
Sorry,
Yes.
just gonna jump in. They did request a slight amendment to it. I can share it on screen.
It would be best if you read it out.
Yes, so the motion, the first part stays the same, so that mayor and council send a letter on behalf of council supporting in principle the Bowen Island Museum and Archives application to the Japanese Canadian Legacy Society Heritage Sites Program for a project commemorating the lives and legacies of Canadians of Japanese ancestry who lived and worked on Bowen Island from the early 1900s until World War II, with the site selection process done in collaborative concert with Bowen Island Municipality.
Councilor Fast?
I'll move that.
Okay, moved as stated, seconded by Councilor Morse. Discussion, yes, Councilor Fast.
Thank you. I like that's a little clearer than just for a heritage site. So I appreciate that detail. And secondly, I'd like to say when we were at, when Councilor Getty and Trustee Getty and I were at Trust Council last week or whenever that was, I heard about two other Japanese commemorative projects possibilities, similar to the letters of support kind of approach we're taking here. One of them was on Main Island, and the other one I think was Gabriola. I don't remember. And but anyway, just this is it's great. Islands together commemorating that terrible time, looking out at the sea, and I'm in support of the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Fast. Any further discussion? Councilor Getty.
I can't imagine that there's going to be any objection to this, but I was on the Heritage Commission and with Bowen Island Heritage Preservation Association for many years, and I think this is a fantastic project. So I would wholeheartedly, enthusiastically endorse this. If there's any way of passing that on to the Legacy Committee as well.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no further questions, I will call the question. Favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye in favor.
And that carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Next, moving on to new business updates, update to council on Metro Vancouver business. Metro Vancouver had a board meeting last week, which discussed part of, in relation to the Mayor's Committee earlier in the meeting, in their desire to provide municipalities, or the direction from the board to provide municipalities with collaborative processes to opt in to get support on compliance with Bill 44. The other piece that I missed is I had to duck out for the Housing Accelerator Fund announcement, which was last week, was around the adoption of Metro Vancouver's development cost charges, which skew very heavily in favor of philosophy of growth pays for growth. And there's been some discussion and pushback from the building industry on that. TransLink has not met with relation to the Mayor's Council. And with that, I will turn it over to Trustees Fast and Getty for a verbal report on Islands Trust business.
Okay. Thanks. Trust Council met a week and a half ago in Nanaimo. We passed the budget 5-year plan. So that's Bowen municipal portion contribution is up 13.1%. Some of which will probably come from new construction. The estimate is 1.1%. And so it went up a little bit because of a good discussion around the Trust Council table about the kinds of things that Financial Planning Committee had tried to remove from the budget in order not to make Bowen's contribution higher. So we put some of those back in, including things like the wildfire webinar that will, Living with Wildfire webinar that'll be tomorrow night, 26th at 7 p.m. Besides the budget that was passed, the trust policy statement was spoken to. This draft, which now includes First Nations input, it's going to come to Trust Council instead of the Trust Programs Committee, which is a small committee that I'm on, but I think it's better if it comes to Trust Council, and it'll come mid-April, probably through a Zoom meeting or something like that. So I'll let you guys know when that happens. It was an interesting meeting. There were some people some trustees were participating by Zoom, and it was hard sometimes to figure out if they were actually there behind the screens, and you know the kinds of problems you can have when you've got 26 trustees and people have
other lives and work and things. So we restored some of the stewardship education things. We restored the secretariat services. So we will still be Islands Trust will still be supporting the Howe Sound Community Forum, for example. And I won't go through my whole long list here, except to say June Trust Council will be on Salt Spring Island. And see 12.3 in your info items there. There's the news release about the budget. Thanks. What do I miss?
Going through the budget process was very, very interesting. It's the Financial Advisory Committee, which neither one of us sit on, and I'm working hard now to try and figure out a way of getting on that as the chair of the governance committee. But that advisory committee had set it up so that the things that they were recommending to keep out of the budget were listed, and they were all things that they knew or they ought to have known that Bowen was going to be very interested in, conservancy related kinds of things. And they left out of that list some of the things that we probably might have objected to if there'd been a whole lot more time. And it's the kind of thing that you have to get through in detail in a committee meeting. So a lot of the little housing projects on the other islands with a big major housing policy project that's going to be done by head office, and the combination of those and different things that I think we were set up in some ways, and I think that we have to work on that so that we're sitting in the meeting and ending up arguing for increases that we've just worked hard to have decrease. So we're going to figure out some strategy around that so that we're doing a lot of the debating way ahead of time and not having to do that in public at the actual budget meeting. So it's a crazy difficult kind of process. But we also had a session on working with media, and they brought in a Jan Enns, who's got a couple of really good friends on Bowen, a remarkable woman. And she gave him a 3-day seminar that she distilled down to half a day in terms of how to best deal with media contacts and when you're asked for interviews and things. That was part of our training session that was very good. And we also did another whole session on our strategic planning, and we'd done a SWOT analysis and we'd done our major values, and then we just prioritize them. So we're working on coming up with some sort of a framework in terms of making some of the decisions about all of the money that gets spent and the staff that get hired at the trust. So that's hopefully going to be in place before next year's budget. So it's good. It was exhausting, but it was good.
Great, thank you. Councilor Morrison.
I have the approved budget in front of me. We're paying $391,260. And none of it will be covered off by a non-market increase because Kristen's report to us back in December or January preliminary tax roll, the decrease due to the Metro buying the Cape Breton to Curtis land is bigger than the increase from new subdivisions and construction. So we have an actual.
She used the figures that came from the province.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. There are no more items for new business. Information that have been received already. The question period is an opportunity for members of the public to request clarification or ask a follow-up question relating to an item discussed at the meeting. I'll look at the corporate officer. Are there any questions for us today? No one wishing to ask questions. Before I seek a motion for adjournment, I just wanted to present something that I noticed as chair today, and I just wanted to thank council. We don't have an easy job, and we had a couple of divisive items on our agenda today. But when I compare ourselves to some other municipalities, what I'm very appreciative of is the way that our discussion moves forward in an issues-based, collaborative and collegial way, despite those disagreements. And it really makes my job easy as chair. And I just wanted to appreciate everyone for that, because I think that it is a testament to the job that we're doing to our, to the community and the constructive types of deliberation that we have. So thank you for that. And with that, I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Wake. No discussion. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. And that carries unanimously. So we'll take a short break between now and the closed meeting. How many minutes?
Break, we just had one.
I need a break.
Yeah.